My dead sister is following me. Posted by u/Thansgato. 8 years ago my sister Carly passed away. She was the person that I was closest to and was able to talk to her about anything. Over the last year me and my girlfriend Brooke started noticing weird things happening around our apartment, such as our TV and PlayStation touring on and off by itself and our speaker would also turn up by itself. One day Brooke and her friend decided to use a Ouija board while I was at work. She asked several questions, one being if she was speaking to my sister Carly. Carly replied yes or why. The next question was if Carly had anything to say to me. Carly replied I'm sorry. When I returned from work Brooke had told me about the experience and I had to see for myself, so we set up the board and I asked who was talking to us. She replied Carly. I was overwhelmed with emotions, happy, sad, excited. I didn't know how to feel and asked if there was anything she wanted to say to me. She replied I love you. I then began to cry and had to say goodbye. I haven't talked to Carly since and strange occurrences kept happening around the apartment after that. Since then I have had a son and we bought a white noise machine. Sometimes at night it turns on by itself. And last night the weirdest occurrence yet, my son started to cry and as I was about to get up, his white noise machine turned on. I can't help but feel that Carly is watching over me and my son. Should I try talking to her again? The Doppelgänger Under My Bed. Posted by u/Soyami. This story is true. This story has only been told to a handful of friends and family. This story still haunts me to this day. You can call me R. I'm a 21-year-old gal who is all too familiar with the paranormal world. Of all my stories I will eventually share with you all, this one is the beginning of it all. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old and this led me to live in 2 separate homes. My father with his newfound freedom had multiple girlfriends, leading me to bounce around different houses over the years, so I was never in one place for too long. When I was around 7, I developed severe insomnia. I would stay up into early hours of the morning watching reruns of Robot Chicken and Family Guy until I eventually succumbed to sleep. On one particular night, as my show played on my TV, a spider crawled across the screen. Even at 7 I was not one to leave a spider be. I couldn't rest knowing one was in my space. I grabbed toilet paper from the bathroom, took care of the spider and crawled back into bed. As I was starting to fall asleep, I felt a vibration from under my bed and thought nothing of it. With my eyes still closed, I could feel and hear the running of fingers slowly moving over the metal bars under my bed. A slow thump as if someone were walking by a fence running their fingers over the bars. At this point I was once again wide awake. Clearly something was under my bed, but we didn't have a cat or a dog, and there was absolutely nothing beneath my bed. So I waited, frozen in fear, hoping that I could just close my eyes and forget about what may be under my bed. But no, my hopes were not answered. This time the hand was aggressive while running the full length of my bed, causing an audible noise and shaking of the bed. I was panicking. I was 7 and absolutely not equipped to take whatever monster was waiting for me. But being the brave spider killer I was, I looked over the side of the bed. Nothing. 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 But then, to anyone's worst nightmare, there was something. It was the crown of something's head. It slowly began moving in a non-human way, moving out from under the bed little by little, eventually exposing only the head. It was me, but when I say it was me, it wasn't either. It was ghastly. By the light of the television, I could see the knots and greasiness in the hair. The skin complexion was almost translucent, revealing dark blue veins that covered its face. The lips cracked and dried beyond repair. But the most haunting visual was its eyes. They were the palest shade of blue with a stare of 1,000 yards that has been burned permanently into my brain. I stared in utter fear. I couldn't move, couldn't make a sound. What seemed like lifetime was in more than 10 seconds. I screamed, absolutely screamed my head off until my dad rushed into the room. While he turned on the lights and panicked, not knowing what was going on nor what to, I was still frozen in fear. He didn't listen to me, said it was a dream and my imagination as a parent would, eventually tucking me in once again to sleep for the night. I left the lights on and prayed to whoever was listening to keep the monster away. What had I just witnessed? The years passed, but I've never forgotten. I still sleep with the TV on, my bed isn't even a foot off the ground, and I medicate myself to sleep all in fear of the possibility of it returning. After 13 years I stopped looking for answers. But after those 13 years, the answer found me. Part 2, Generations of Hauntings. Afternoon you all, I started with Part 1, The Doppelganger Under My Bed. This story is filled with accounts from multiple family members. It's a long one but I hope you enjoy. Cheers. My father's side of my family lived in Des Moines, Washington in the late 60s to mid-80s. Through divorce and a house burned to ashes, My grandmother and non-blood grandfather moved into a house suitable to fit the 10 members of their family. Their children consisted of 4 girls and 4 boys. Almost all the experiences were witnessed by the women of my family, which is very important to note. Everything started with an act of kindness. My aunt, we'll call her Jay, is the 3rd oldest out of the siblings. After moving into the house, Aunt Jay did some exploring as one would with new territory. She found an old cemetery with her younger sister Kay. Being the kind-hearted people they are, they spent a day clearing the overgrown grass and dirt covering the gravestones. The longer she stayed, she felt connected to the people, so she took time to read the names on the stones, hoping to keep their memory alive. Unfortunately, she made a terrible mistake. Shortly after the clearing of the cemetery, subtle but strange things began happening in their home. It started with the smell of roses, almost as if someone had brought fresh flowers from the market. The smell would be brief, would come at random moments like walking through the hall or while they sat and ate dinner. They couldn't explain it, but it was pleasant and they never minded. Soon a noticeable stain appeared above the kitchen doorway. My grandmother, being a housewife, spent more than enough time trying to rid the stain, but no matter the cleaning method, it would never fade. The stain turned out to have much more significance than just a visual inconvenience. Around this time, 2 neighboring boys were walking to school and came across a grisly sight. A young woman was found in a grassy roadside ditch, dead, covered in morning frost. The area had been seeing a lot of kidnappings and murders of young women at the time. This will be a key element later on in the story. As time passed, the occurrences became more frequent, more intense. The house was 2 stories. Most of the bedrooms were in the basement, which was slightly unfinished, leaving few lights and some doors without doorknobs. As you could imagine, it left an eerie feeling in a house already fueled with energy. At the time, the 2 oldest siblings, both boys, had moved out of the house, leaving 6 siblings behind. One of the first visual sightings belonged to my father. He witnessed a green mist flow through the empty hole where the doorknob would be. He would hear knocking at his door, and shuffling of objects in his room. My dad was young at the time, so of course he moved into a room with his brother, who was basically deaf and never personally experienced anything. I'm not sure of any more personal experiences he had, because he would not share them with me, nor would he acknowledge what he experienced. This explains why he wouldn't listen to me about the creature under my bed. Next was my Aunt S, and she might have had the most terrifying experience in the home. S was my grandfather's child. She was adopted during his first marriage, as her mother had passed away from cancer. She had already experienced so much in her young life, which led her to be susceptible to the events. On one night, she woke up to the shaking of her bed, and what happened next would shake anyone to their core. She saw faces. Hundreds of ghoulish green and yellow faces covered her walls and ceiling. They were looking straight at her, mouths moving as if they were speaking. They didn't make a sound. After that night, she understandably moved into her sister Kay's room on the upper floor. Aunt L was also pretty young at the time. One notable occurrence she experienced was she could never hang anything up in her room, as everything would fall or fly off the wall. One night her mirror flew off the wall, shattering into a million pieces. Objects on dressers would fly across the room. She never got a restful night's sleep. In 2018 I discovered that Aunt L could hear voices of those past. No matter where she goes, she always has experiences to this day. Now back to the key member of this story, Aunt Jay. One night, all the siblings camped out on top of the easily accessible carport. As the kids were sleeping, their dogs started to bark. Jay woke up and investigated the backyard. They had a shed not too far from the carport. A light pole sat right next to it. At the base of the pole she saw a glowing sliver of bluish light about 3 feet long standing vertically. The light slowly moved up the length of the light pole to the top of the tree line, where it stayed for at least 5 minutes. She told me she felt comfortable, almost as if it were a long-time friend. After some time the light bent 90 degrees and quickly took off, fading into the night. Fast forward to her senior year of high school. As the school year was ending, she came down with a serious sickness that took her out of school for more than 2 weeks. One day she needed to go to school later in the morning, which caused her to have to walk the at most mile distance to her school. The neighborhood was familiar to her, knowing almost every family in the area, so she walked comfortably to school. About halfway, an older and loud muscle car passed her slowly. It would turn around and made a couple of slow passes. As he passed her the last time, she heard a crystal clear voice of a woman in her ear saying, "Run." And so she ran. Jay could hear the car door open and footsteps trailing behind her. The school was surrounded by a green belt, so taking the road to the school would be a death sentence, but taking the shortcut through the green belt could save her life. As she ran through the dirt trails, she heard the voice again, telling her to relax her arms. As she did, the man ripped her backpack off her shoulders. She ran as her life depended on it. As she made it to the edge of the school parking lot, she jumped over a log into the parking lot, just escaping his grip on her jacket. She ran into the school, immediately reporting it to the principal. They never found the man. Jay believes, along with the rest of my family, that it was the man who murdered the young girl that was found in the ditch. Jay also believes that the sliver of light was the girl's spirit that truthfully saved her life. When enough became enough, my family spoke to priests at the University of Washington, leading to an exorcism and blessing of the home. A medium came to the home and told them that a man and his wife lived on the property in a house that no longer stood. From an unfortunate event, the wife died and the husband died shortly after. The gravestones my aunt had read were those of the husband and wife. Turns out that the smell of roses was their wife. The priests spread holy water over the house, even on the stain over the kitchen doorway, which eventually disappeared. After that day, the energy seemed to die off and things began to feel as a house should. Their story ended up in the newspaper, all identities hidden, but their accounts had been recorded for the public to read and believe for themselves. Most of the family moved to Idaho, which led a new family to move into the home. They discovered later that the daughter had an imaginary female friend, but she wasn't imaginary at all. There's no updates on that family or their experiences. With my 8 aunts and uncles, I have 9 cousins. 7 of them are male and the other 2 are women. Remember how I said the experiences were mostly felt and witnessed by women? Well, my 2 cousins and I have had numerous experiences throughout our lives. My cousin T had an imaginary soldier friend. He would talk to her and tell her things a young girl would have no understanding about. My cousin K recently had a heartbreaking experience that revolved around a murder of a young girl in the Seattle area. She would see her everywhere she went, the grocery store, walks, within the hallways of the hospital she worked at. Turns out the young girl had been murdered by a family member and her murder hadn't been caught until recently. And as for me, my experiences started when I was 7 with the terrifying experience of the doppelganger under my bed. In my early preteen years, I lived with my mom and brother in a newly built house. At this time I had gotten an iPhone, the iPhone 4 to be exact. My friend has stayed the night and she was one to be obsessed with her looks, so she decided to take selfies on my phone. Upon looking at them, we discovered a face hovering over the fabric of the couch. When she had took the pictures, it was dark and the TV was playing in the background, but it was bright and no light would reflect off the fabric of the couch. After finding one face, we discovered 3 more. The faces were absolutely evil looking. They were cloudy but translucent, yellow eyes and mouths open, exposing large teeth. My mother made me delete the photos, but I regret deleting such powerful evidence of the paranormal. Years passed without another profound experience, but I always felt the energy of certain places. Always feeling uneasy and sad when I shouldn't. Fast forward to 2018, I went on a much-needed family vacation to Seaside, Oregon. I was accompanied by 2 friends who wanted to explore the area. Close to Seaside is Astoria, which sits at the mouth of the Columbia River. The area is notorious for the dangerous ocean waters that has caused hundreds of shipwrecks in the early years of its settlement. We toured a historic Victorian manor originally built by Captain Flavel. Although rich in history, the energy was non-existent and we moved deeper into the town to get our fill of the history. We were directed to an old firehouse turned museum. There we met an older gentleman by the name of Dr. D, who was a local college professor but did tours of the firehouse in the summer. Through curiosity and respect of the building, we quickly became trusted companions. He led us to the 2nd floor to a door that led to a stairway to the 3rd story, which was the firemen's quarters. He explained that if the door was locked, we weren't invited, but if it was unlocked, we were welcomed in. The door was unlocked, so we made our way up the stairs, the railings and windows filled with dusty cobwebs, a path that didn't seem well traveled. Once we reached the top of the stairs, I began to feel like we were invading on someone's space. We didn't belong. We turned around and headed back down the stairs to the 2nd floor, where there was 2 rooms of exhibits. While crossing through a doorway into the other room, my friend quickly turned around, explaining that the lights had just flickered on and off numerous times. Once I stepped into the room, I was immediately stuck to one spot. I stood in front of a glass case ceiling and old uniform. I couldn't move from that spot. I was overcome by sadness and despair, feeling the energy being drained out of me. As we stood there standing in front of the case, the light began flickering. Dr. D explained that those lights are all connected to one switch, so there was no reason for one case to flicker. Eventually we were able to step outside. I sat on the curb regaining my energy, but still stuck with a pit in my heart. To this day I can still very clearly recall that feeling. 2018 was the year I moved from Idaho to Seattle. This is when the stories were passed down to me and I eventually got the chance to see the Des Moines house. It still stands looking friendly on the outside, but the terrors of my family still resonate within its walls. From my experiences, I always wondered why I saw and felt things that others didn't. I soon discovered that the women in my family are sensitive to the spirit world, which only leads to more questions. I don't know what lies ahead of me, but I'm sure my experiences don't end there. Thank you. Although it is a small account of my family's experiences, one day I hope to be able to document more stories with the permission of my family, of course. And for those wondering, I will try to retrieve and make a copy of the newspaper article. My grandmother kept it in her china hutch, but after her passing and moving of her belongings it may be difficult to track down, but I will try to find it on my next visit to my hometown.
Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos.